Once upon a time, an old woman discovered a tiny kitten who, like a shivering little leaf, trembled from the cold. In time, as the kitten grew, its behavior began to astonish. Its piercing eyes of bright yellow tracked every movement of those around it, and its unpredictable leaps defied all logic. When the mystery was finally unraveled, the old woman was stunned. The little kitten was not at all what it appeared to be at first glance. One autumn evening, in particular, remained vivid in her memory. In the silence of her cozy living room, where only the flicker of a candle accompanied her thoughts, a strange sound broke the stillness. The old woman, startled, froze while clutching a cup of hot tea. She stood in anticipation, straining to hear that unusual noise. A few seconds later, it repeated, a soft, plaintive squeak that seemed to echo through the autumn night, filled with freshness and a slight chill. Taking a deep breath and feeling her heart quicken, she wrapped a colorful shawl around her shoulders and resolutely rose to her feet. Outside, dusk deepened, casting the yard into half-light. The cool night air, which amplified every sound, made even the slightest rustle seem louder. The old woman heard the wind rustling through the leaves and the creaking of tree branches. Her curiosity mingled with apprehension. Removing a lantern from its hook by the door, she cautiously descended the steps. The beam of the lantern cut through the dense darkness, casting long shadows that danced on walls and trees. Following the recurring sound through her garden, she was led to an ancient oak standing at the far end of the yard. There, her eyes fixed on a tiny bundle shivering from the cold, huddled against the mighty tree's roots. The little creature turned out to be a kitten whose wide, fearful eyes were fixed on her. The old woman's heart, as if frozen, began to thaw at the tender sight. Without a moment's hesitation, she picked up the kitten. Its damp fur was cold to the touch, and its tiny body quivered weakly. Feeling the warmth, the kitten pressed closer to her until a fresh gust of wind swirled around them, a reminder of the late autumn chill. Without wasting another minute, the old woman carried the little one into her home, carefully wrapping it in a warm cloth. Her mind was preoccupied with the kitten's well-being, and the mix of concern and urgency spurred her to act swiftly. In the kitchen, where the warmth and coziness softened even the howling wind, the old woman gently washed the kitten with warm water, cleansing it of dirt and the chill. Soon, a soft squeak once again disturbed the silence. After wrapping the kitten in a fluffy blanket, she prepared a cup of warm milk for it. The little creature drank eagerly, as if it were its first nourishment in many days. Gradually, its body began to relax, the trembling ceased, and its gaze grew warmer. The old woman felt a joy that had long been absent from her heart. The kitten's presence imbued her home with new meaning, brightening her everyday life. The question of how such a tiny creature had ended up in her garden still occupied her thoughts. Yet now, as she gazed upon the peacefully sleeping kitten, she was simply happy in its company. This little guest had given her a sense of warmth and care, coloring her loneliness with new hues. By March, her lost resolve was gradually returning, as if a small flame inside her was burning ever brighter. Soft morning rays crept gently into the room, seemingly eager to dispel the remnants of the night's darkness. Nearby, in a cozy corner, a new companion of hers, the little kitten still without a name, stirred. Its sleep was quiet and serene, but now it opened its eyes as if sensing that its mistress was no longer asleep. Barely awake, she continued to watch the tiny creature with warmth in her thoughts. Energetic and determined, Martha suddenly realized that the moment had come to get to know her little friend better. Cradling the kitten in her arms, she stepped outside where the new day greeted them with brilliant colors. The world beyond her doorstep seemed to come alive with them, filled with freshness and light. Strolling along the path leading to the old oak, Martha recalled their first encounter. That place, sheltered in the shade of the mighty tree, now looked completely different in the daylight. Not long ago, the details had been hidden by the darkness of night. now everything appeared transformed. As she approached closer, she noticed the pressed leaves on the ground and traces of a struggle left in the soft earth. These signs reminded her of what the little kitten had endured. She recalled finding it at the foot of the tree, a fragile creature barely fighting for its survival. Returning to the garden, Martha sat on a bench and gently held the kitten close, as if to shield it from all possible misfortunes. A deep sense of affection and tenderness began to blossom in her heart. In a soft, barely audible whisper, she confided while gazing into its eyes, "You're a true little explorer, aren't you?" The kitten, as though understanding her words, responded with a quiet, almost inaudible sound. In its eyes flickered both fear and curiosity. It seemed as if it recognized the place, perhaps recalling its past trials. Martha's determination only grew stronger. She realized that her mission now was to shield this fragile creature from the perils of the outside world. Back at home, she set about making the yard safe. Meanwhile, her new friend playfully scampered around her feet, as if already declaring the place his new home. Inside, Martha felt a burgeoning sense of confidence. She knew she would never again leave him alone or allow fate to endanger him. The anxious thoughts that had once plagued her began to give way to a luminous feeling of joy and tranquility. This little kitten, who had unexpectedly entered her life, had become the symbol of a new chapter. Martha eagerly awaited what this unforeseen twist would bring. She understood that both joys and challenges lay ahead, but she was determined to face them. This little fluffy friend had already become an indispensable part of her life, filling her days with warmth and renewed hope. When the door closed behind them, a gentle smile curved the corners of her lips. Her measured life would never be the same, and unable to contain her joy, she allowed herself to be swept up in new experiences. Life, though it sometimes presented hardships, had taken on a new meaning. Oliver, she had named her little pet Oliver, had remarkably adapted to his new home. His first night in Martha's house passed in an atmosphere of curiosity and caution. He explored every corner, and as Martha lay in bed, she listened intently to the faint tapping of his tiny paws on the wooden floor. A mix of worry and tenderness filled her soul. Martha wondered whether Oliver needed a thorough checkup. Deciding not to delay, she dialed the number of the local veterinarian, Dr. Brown, to schedule an appointment. While waiting for the visit, she noticed that her pet began to behave even more cautiously, as if anticipating something unusual. In the vet's office, he clung tightly to Martha, his large eyes carefully surveying the new surroundings. With a warm smile, Dr. Brown greeted them. "Who do we have here?" he said softly, extending his hand so Oliver could sniff it before the examination. Martha watched the veterinarian's actions with a hint of apprehension. Dr. Brown noted that despite the trials the kitten had endured, his condition had significantly improved. His young age and the ordeals he had experienced warranted extra care and attention. After leaving the clinic, Martha felt a sense of relief. In Oliver's travel bag, she carefully arranged everything he might need: food, vitamins, and a toy. On the way home, she explained to the kitten about the garden, the plants, and the birds, as if introducing him to the new world he was now a part of. Gradually, Oliver began to feel more secure, and his playful nature shone through. He delighted in chasing the sunbeams in the living room. By evening, as Martha settled comfortably, she suddenly realized she was laughing. This sound was so rare in her life that she couldn't help but marvel at how unfamiliar it felt. Meanwhile, Oliver, nestled cozily on her lap, purred with pleasure. At that moment, Martha understood just how much her everyday life had transformed. A life once filled with solitude now had meaning, thanks to this little creature. Evenings that had once passed in silence were now brimming with conversation that reflected their mutual attachment and need for one another. Gazing at the sleeping Oliver, Martha felt her heart swell with a sense of responsibility and love. It was clear that Oliver had adapted wonderfully to his new home. Moreover, he had become an indispensable part of her life, filling it with warmth and joy. Over time, as days slowly melted into weeks, Martha began to notice in Oliver traits that set him apart from other kittens she had known before. One morning, while enjoying tea by the window, she was captivated by Oliver moving with an unusual concentration. In the dim light of the room, his movements could hardly be described as playful, as is typical for young cats. Rather, they were precise and measured. His gaze, reminiscent of that of an experienced observer, swept over the surroundings, capturing even the slightest movements that might escape even the most attentive person. A hidden threat seemed to linger in the air. When a leaf was suddenly dislodged from a branch outside the window, the cat's reaction was lightning fast and astonishing. With incredible agility, he darted toward the window, pressing his paws firmly against the glass and focusing entirely on the activity beyond. While Martha tenderly cared for her pet, Oliver remained by her side, attentively watching her every move. His ears responded to the faintest sounds that Martha herself could not hear, and his head would instantaneously swivel toward distant noises, as if endowed with an extraordinarily keen sense of hearing. All of this only deepened the feeling of unease that was growing within her. Reflecting on how much of Oliver's wild nature still remained evident in his everyday play, Martha increasingly recognized his unique qualities. The toys she provided, feather-tipped sticks, soft balls, elicited genuine enthusiasm in him. He played with them, demonstrating a mastery that both captivated and slightly frightened Martha. This was not merely a cute kitten but a small, fierce predator. One evening, while observing Oliver's behavior, she noticed his unusual movements. With remarkable grace and precision, the cat performed squats and lunges that went well beyond typical feline antics. These peculiarities left Martha pondering, were they merely the whims of a playful character, or was there something deeper concealed beneath? In such moments, Martha realized that mere attention and care might not be enough to unravel the true nature of her extraordinary pet. As winter approached, the days grew shorter and the nights colder. Yet in Martha's home, a cozy atmosphere prevailed, nurtured by the fire burning in the hearth. That comfort, however, only underscored her growing concern. Oliver's behavior was becoming ever more peculiar, each day raising new questions. Throughout her life with the cat, Martha had observed unusual manifestations of his character. One day, while tending the garden, she noted Oliver's reaction to birds scattering in all directions. Instead of the expected playful chase, he sat motionless, watching them with a discerning gaze, like an experienced hunter. His body remained tense, poised as if ready to leap, and his look betrayed his innate instincts. Even after the birds had flown away, he continued to monitor them intently, maintaining a posture that spoke of his latent power. Such behavior led Martha to increasingly suspect that her pet was far from an ordinary kitten, but rather possessed a unique nature that she was only beginning to understand. Later, while indoors, Martha decided to try to interest Oliver with a new toy infused with catnip. Yet his reaction was completely unexpected. He merely sniffed the toy indifferently and then calmly walked away. This behavior was atypical for most cats, who usually exhibit active interest in such items. In contrast, Oliver was fascinated by a simple piece of string, accidentally plucked from Martha's sewing kit. Gradually, her interactions with the string began to form a coherent realization. Each time, Martha became more and more convinced that Oliver was unlike other members of the feline world. His differences lay not only in his appearance, with his remarkably round yellow eyes, fluffy cheeks, and compact yet sturdy body, but also in an intrinsic, innate quality that could not be ignored. On one quiet evening, as they settled together before the fireplace, Martha watched Oliver's silhouette, sharply outlined against the flames. His ears, always alert, caught every sound, the crackle and pop of the fire. His body, tense like a string, was ready to react at any unexpected moment. In that peaceful setting, basking in the warm glow of the hearth, Martha seriously pondered for the first time, could it be that her cat was not really what he appeared to be at first glance? "Oliver, who are you really?" she whispered, gazing at him with a gentle smile yet deep inner agitation. In response, he turned his head and looked into her eyes with a penetrating, almost all-knowing gaze, as though he truly understood the depth of her question. The next day, her suspicions only intensified. When her neighbor Susan dropped by to see Oliver, she exclaimed with delight as soon as she laid eyes on him, "Martha, this is such an extraordinary cat. Have you seen his eyes? And his behavior? It's as if he knows more about us than we do ourselves." Martha laughed, trying to brush it off as a joke, yet Susan's words struck a chord deep within her. They sowed a seed of doubt in her mind that grew with every passing minute. Eager to find answers, Martha contacted Dr. Brown again, describing her observations and sharing the strange thoughts that had begun to trouble her. The following morning, Martha brought Oliver to the veterinarian. Dr. Brown, always noted for his kindness and professional dedication, greeted them with a smile. However, while examining the cat, he furrowed his brows noticeably. "Martha, his eyes. There's something incredible. In all my years, I've seen many cats, but Oliver is truly unique," he said, his tone mingling admiration with concern, a combination that only amplified Martha's inner anxiety. "I think we should run a few tests," he continued after a pause. "Just to rule out any unusual hypotheses and understand who he really is." "Of course, Doctor, I agree," Martha replied, feeling a spark of hope ignite in her chest even as her apprehension grew. After leaving the clinic, Martha's heart was filled with mixed feelings of wonder and fear. Oliver's uniqueness lay not only in his behavior or unusual appearance but also in the depths of his essence. At first glance a cute and harmless pet, this cat was something far greater. The mystery of his true nature was gradually unfolding, and Martha was coming to the increasingly clear realization that the results of the tests might very well upend her world. After her meeting with Dr. Brown, Martha was consumed by a blend of anxiety and anticipation. Every phone call in her home seemed unusually loud, as if heralding the arrival of the long-awaited moment. Finally, the phone rang again, and with trembling hands Martha reached for the receiver. On the other end, a voice said, "Mrs. Thompson. We have received the test results." Dr. Brown's voice came through with a noticeable uncertainty that immediately set Martha on edge. "What did you find?" she asked, glancing at Oliver, who sat motionless on the windowsill, watching the proceedings with an extraordinary focus. It was as if the cat, too, was awaiting an answer. Carefully choosing his words, the doctor continued. "The genetic markers in your Oliver differ significantly from those typical for domestic cats. Moreover, they indicate that." A chill ran down Martha's spine. Her premonitions were beginning to come true. The astonishing discovery shook Martha to her core and proved far more significant than she could have imagined. During her conversation with Dr. Brown, it emerged that Oliver might not be an ordinary house cat at all. More likely, he had a connection with rare palace cats, or perhaps even with wild species native to Central Asia. These animals differ greatly from the common domestic cat in both grace and genetic traits. Realizing that a creature with a wild nature resided in her home, Martha felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This revelation undoubtedly carried serious implications, from both a legal and an ethical standpoint. Dr. Brown explained that this particular type of cat is rare, though not entirely unheard of. Often, young wild cats are mistaken for domestic pets, especially due to their not yet fully formed appearance. It's important we discuss how this will affect Oliver's future. Preserving his wild nature is a challenging task, often tied to stringent legal requirements, she noted. Martha listened to the doctor's words with a heavy heart, and as she looked at Oliver, she discerned something strangely familiar in the contours of his little face. Features that once seemed ordinary now appeared in an entirely new light. This revelation evoked in her conflicting emotions, a blend of awe and fear. It was as if Oliver had caught her bewildered gaze. He deftly leapt from the windowsill and, treading softly, approached his mistress. Rubbing against her legs, he seemed to be trying to comfort her. While her hands caressed his soft, thick, silvery fur, Martha's mind was a whirl of thoughts and emotions. She realized that Oliver was not a simple house cat. This wild creature had masterfully concealed his true nature behind the mask of an ordinary pet. Yet the bond that had formed between them was genuine and deep, even as it was laden with the awareness of the responsibility imposed by Oliver's true nature. She understood that a decision had to be made, and it would not be an easy one. "He deserves nothing but the best," Martha finally murmured, barely holding back a tremor in her voice. "I have no right to be selfish. He deserves to live in accordance with his true nature, not merely for my own comfort." The day eventually came when she had to bid farewell to Oliver. Holding him in her arms, Martha felt the warmth of his little body, the softness of his fur, and the rhythmic purring that brought her solace. Several months had passed since she decided to entrust Oliver to a wildlife sanctuary. Parting with him was a significant step for her. Consciously, she chose freedom for Oliver. "Goodbye, my dear Oliver," Martha whispered as she gently placed him in his carrier. Oliver lifted his deep, dark yellow eyes to her, as if understanding that their paths were parting. As the car drove away into the distance, Martha stood motionless, watching tears stream down her cheeks. Her heart ached with pain, yet within that sorrow lay a bittersweet relief. Oliver would now live as he was meant to, free and wild. Martha felt herself to be the link between his past and his future. Though the separation was agonizing, it also filled her with a profound inner peace. The realization that he would thrive in his natural habitat brought her comfort. When the sun finally sank below the horizon, Martha turned and slowly walked away, deeply grateful for the lessons Oliver had taught her. His presence had taught her to cherish nature, to value its strength, and to embrace life in all its manifestations. Despite the physical parting, he would forever remain a part of her heart, leaving an indelible mark. Years passed, and life continued its quiet rhythm until one day an unexpected revelation began to reshape everything Martha thought she knew. Oliver had adjusted quickly to life in her home. His first night in Martha's house had been filled with curiosity and caution, each nook and cranny explored while Martha, lying in bed, listened to the soft patter of his tiny paws on the wooden floor, a blend of worry and tenderness intermingling in her soul. Over time, Martha started noticing in Oliver traits that distinguished him from other kittens she had encountered before. One morning, while savoring her tea by the window, her eyes caught Oliver moving with an uncommon focus. In the dim light of the room, his movements could hardly be described as playful, a hallmark of youth. Rather, they were precise and deliberate. His gaze, like that of a seasoned observer, swept over the room, tracking even the slightest motions that might escape the notice of the most attentive person. There was an undercurrent of a hidden threat in the air. When a leaf detached from a branch outside the window, Oliver's reaction was lightning fast and astonishing. With incredible agility, he dashed toward the window, pressing his paws firmly against the glass, completely absorbed by the unfolding scene outside. As Martha continued to care for her pet with unwavering tenderness, Oliver was ever at her side, watching her every move intently. His ears twitched at the faintest sounds that Martha herself could not detect, and his head would pivot instantly toward distant noises, as if he possessed a supernaturally acute sense of hearing. All of this only amplified the growing unease in her heart. Reflecting on the freedom of Oliver's wild spirit that still surfaced in his daily play, Martha increasingly recognized his unique qualities. The toys she offered him, feather-tipped sticks, soft balls, sparked genuine excitement in him. He played with them, displaying a mastery that both enchanted and slightly frightened Martha. This was not merely an adorable kitten but a small, fierce predator. One evening, as she observed Oliver's behavior, she noted his unusual movements. With remarkable grace and precision, the cat executed squats and lunges that far exceeded typical feline behavior. These oddities left Martha to wonder, were they merely the quirks of a playful character, or was there something deeper at work? In those moments, Martha realized that attention and care alone might not suffice to decipher the true essence of her extraordinary pet. As winter drew near, the days grew shorter and the nights colder. Yet inside Martha's home, the cozy atmosphere, fostered by the crackling fire in the hearth, persisted. Still, that very warmth served to accentuate her worry. Oliver's behavior grew ever more bizarre, and each day seemed to add new questions. Throughout her time with him, Martha had observed unusual manifestations of his character. One day, while tidying up in the garden, she noted Oliver's reaction to birds scattering in all directions. Instead of the expected playful chase, he sat perfectly still, studying them with a discerning gaze as if he were an experienced hunter. His body remained taut, poised for a leap, while his expression revealed his innate predatory instincts. Even after the birds had flown away, he continued to watch them intently, holding a posture that spoke of his hidden might. Such behavior led Martha to increasingly suspect that her pet was far from an ordinary kitten, but rather possessed a unique nature that she was only beginning to fathom. Later that day, while indoors, Martha decided to entice Oliver with a new toy infused with catnip. Yet his reaction was entirely unexpected. He merely sniffed the toy indifferently before calmly moving away. This was atypical for most cats, who would usually exhibit active interest in such items. Instead, Oliver was captivated by a simple piece of string, accidentally plucked from Martha's sewing kit. Gradually, as she manipulated the string, a realization began to take shape. With each passing moment, it became ever clearer just how different Oliver was from his feline peers. These differences were not only evident in his appearance, with his extraordinarily round yellow eyes, fluffy cheeks, and compact yet strong body, but also in an innate, intrinsic quality that could not be ignored. One quiet evening, as they settled together before the fireplace, Martha studied Oliver's silhouette, sharply defined against the dancing flames. His ears, ever alert, caught every sound, the crackle and pop of the fire. His body, tense like a drawn bowstring, was ready to react at a moment's notice. In that serene atmosphere, bathed in the warm glow of the hearth, Martha finally found herself asking a profound question. "Oliver, who are you really?" "Oliver, who are you really?" she whispered, looking at him with a gentle smile yet profound inner turmoil. In response, he turned his head and fixed her with his penetrating, almost all-knowing gaze, as though he truly comprehended the depth of her inquiry. The following day, her suspicions only deepened. When neighbor Susan visited to see Oliver, she exclaimed with delight at the sight of him, "Martha, what an extraordinary cat this is! Have you seen his eyes? And his behavior? It's as if he knows more about us than we do ourselves." Martha laughed, attempting to dismiss it as a jest, but Susan's words resonated deeply within her. They planted a seed of doubt in her mind that only grew with each passing minute. Determined to find answers, Martha reached out to Dr. Brown once again, describing her observations and sharing the peculiar thoughts that had begun to trouble her. The next morning, Martha brought Oliver to the veterinarian. Dr. Brown, ever warm and professionally engaged, greeted them with a smile. Yet as he examined the cat, he noticeably furrowed his brows. "Martha, his eyes. They're extraordinary. In all my practice, I've seen many cats, but Oliver is truly unique," he remarked, his voice imbued with both admiration and concern, a combination that only heightened Martha's inner anxiety. "I think we should run some tests," he continued after a pause. just to rule out any unusual hypotheses and truly understand who he is. Of course, Doctor, I agree, Martha replied, feeling a spark of hope light within her even as her worry deepened. When they left the clinic, Martha's heart was filled with a mix of wonder and trepidation. Oliver's uniqueness lay not only in his peculiar behavior or striking appearance but also in the depths of his very being. At first glance a cute, innocuous pet, he was something far more profound. The mystery of his true nature was slowly unraveling, and Martha was coming to the increasingly clear realization that the results of these tests could very well upend her entire world. After the meeting with Dr. Brown, Martha was overcome by anxiety mixed with anticipation. Every ring of the telephone in her house sounded especially loud, as if heralding the arrival of that long-awaited moment. Finally, the phone rang again, and with trembling hands, Martha reached for the receiver. On the other end, a voice said, "Mrs. Thompson. We have received the test results." Dr. Brown's voice came through with a note of uncertainty that instantly alarmed Martha. "What did you find?" she asked, casting a glance at Oliver, who sat motionless on the windowsill, his gaze fixed with extraordinary intensity, as if he too were awaiting an answer. The doctor, choosing his words carefully, continued, "The genetic markers in your Oliver differ significantly from those typical for domestic cats. Moreover, they indicate." A shiver of icy fear ran down Martha's spine. Her premonitions were coming true. The astonishing revelation shook Martha to her very core and turned out to be far more significant than she could have ever imagined. In her conversation with Dr. Brown, it emerged that Oliver might not be an ordinary house cat at all. Most likely, he was connected to rare palace cats, or even wild species that inhabit Central Asia. These animals differ greatly from the typical domestic cat in both grace and genetic makeup. Realizing that a creature with a wild essence resided in her home, Martha experienced a mingling of excitement and awe. This discovery would undoubtedly have serious implications, from legal perspectives to ethical considerations. Dr. Brown explained that this type of cat, while rare, was not entirely unheard of. Often, young wild cats are mistaken for domestic pets, especially given their not yet fully formed appearance. It's important we discuss how this will affect Oliver's future. Preserving his wild nature is a challenging task, often bound by strict legal requirements, she noted. Martha listened to the doctor's words with a heavy heart, and as she looked at Oliver, she perceived something oddly familiar in the contours of his little face. Features that once seemed ordinary now appeared in an entirely new light. This revelation evoked conflicting emotions within her, a blend of reverence and fear. It was as though Oliver had sensed her bewilderment. He deftly leapt from the windowsill and, treading softly, approached his mistress. Rubbing against her legs, he seemed intent on offering her comfort. As her hands caressed his soft, thick, silvery fur, Martha's mind became a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She realized that Oliver was not a simple house cat. This wild creature had skillfully hidden his true nature behind the mask of an ordinary pet. Yet the bond that had grown between them was genuine and profound, accompanied by the acute awareness of the responsibility that came with Oliver's true nature. She understood that a decision had to be made, and it would not be an easy one. "He deserves the very best," Martha finally murmured, her voice trembling. "I have no right to be selfish. He deserves to live in accordance with his nature, not merely for my own solace." The day eventually came when she had to say goodbye to Oliver. Holding him in her arms, Martha felt the warmth of his little body, the softness of his fur, and the steady purr that brought her comfort. Several months had passed since she had decided to hand Oliver over to a wildlife sanctuary. Parting with him was a momentous step. Consciously, she chose freedom for Oliver. "Goodbye, my dear Oliver," Martha whispered as she gently placed him into his carrier. Oliver lifted his deep, dark yellow eyes to her, as if understanding that their paths were parting. As the car drove away into the distance, Martha stood rooted to the spot, watching tears stream down her cheeks. Her heart ached with sorrow, yet within that pain lay a bittersweet relief. Oliver would now live as he was meant to, free and wild. Martha felt that she was the link between his past and his future. Though the farewell was agonizing, it also filled her with an inner peace. The knowledge that he would thrive in his natural environment brought her solace. When the sun finally disappeared beyond the horizon, Martha turned and slowly walked away, filled with deep gratitude for the lessons Oliver had taught her. His presence had taught her to cherish nature, to value its power, and to embrace life in all its manifestations. Despite their physical separation, he would forever remain a part of her heart, leaving an indelible mark.